Hello and welcome to the Hibs Observer post-match debrief from Hibs 1, Celtic 2. A mixed night for Hibs, really, wasn't it, Patrick? I mean, a good performance, much better than what we saw against St Mirren at the weekend. But I mean, it's you're not going to catch anybody at Easter Road celebrating a defeat, and certainly the manner of it was a hard one for Hibs to take. Two penalties for Celtic, one right at the beginning of the game, and then one right at the very end after consultation with VAR. So it's one of those ones where it's certainly a kick in the teeth for Hibs and Nick Montgomery, and I think you could really tell afterwards that he was not frustrated with the performance, really proud of the performance, he said, but you could tell there was a real sort of frustration in his sort of demeanour and his voice about just how it turned out in the end. Because I mean, I think it was pretty much unanimously agreed that I don't think Hibs deserved that outcome last night, did they?
No, not at all. The performance was night and day from the weekend against St Mirren. I think obviously the big questions once you've looked at all the good bits has to be, why can't they do that in every game? It can't be a case of we've got a big game under the lights in midweek, so we'll raise our game against like a big opponent. That has to be the benchmark for every single game going forward. And I think, to be fair, that's what Nick Montgomery is after. That's what he wants. That's what he's trying to drill into the players. And you have to imagine that if Hibs play like that against any other Scottish Premiership opponent, if they play like that on Saturday at Inverness, then the second half of the season could actually end up being a heck of a lot more different than it was looking sort of 5-5 on Saturday afternoon. But I mean, just so much to like from the performance, so much in the way of change for good. Obviously having Martin Boyle and Lewis Miller back made a big difference. To be fair, Montgomery's been banging the drum for weeks now. He said, having those players back will make a difference. Certainly showed that last night. But even sort of players coming in like Nathan Mariah-Welsh, who I think looks to be the midfielder who Hibs have been missing for a good number of seasons now, and even players who, we did our predicted lineups before the game or what we thought the team might be, and very easy to look at Saturday's performance and say, get him out of the team, put him on the bench. But in fairness, there were players who I think it was a surprise to see them starting, and whilst it wasn't a kind of perfect performance, I think Dylan Levitt, despite his goal, did seem to struggle to begin with, and it has to be a confidence thing. But in fairness to him, he kind of grew into the game even before the goal. He was taking a lot from his strike, and I was a wee bit surprised when he took him off for Luke Amos, but I can kind of understand the logic. And obviously, we'll drill down into the game and its incidents in greater detail throughout the course of this. But I think just my sort of main takeaway was that it's the first time in a long time that it's actually been enjoyable watching Hibs play. And yes, they got beaten, and they probably didn't deserve to get beat, and they had plenty of chances they didn't take. I mean, you could reel them off. Will Fish, Lewis Miller, Martin Boyle, Mizani Maulida. So many chances that they could probably have scored 4 or 5, and it wouldn't have been outrageous. And that has to be a good thing going forward. And you would hope that the players and the squad as a whole can take a lot of confidence from the performance, but also the man with the defeat might also serve as something of a kind of might galvanise them and just think the injustice or the perceived injustice of how it went down. I think could also sort of help them kick on, give them a platform to sort of basically pick up where they left off. Ideally, when they play Inverness at the weekend, and if they can get a good result there, and just kind of get things back on an even keel and go from there.
Yeah. I mean, as much as it was a good performance, it was the worst possible start to a game, really, that you could imagine. I remember looking at the clock, and there was, I think we were about maybe 2.5 minutes in, and I don't think Hibs had touched the ball. I mean, it's not like Celtic looked immediately threatening. It was just like, I think in those first couple of minutes, Hibs were penned in, and you were thinking, right, is this going to be the way that this game's going to pan out? Is it going to be, kind of attack v defensive exercise? Has, the defeat at the weekend and the manner of it just, convinced Nick Montgomery that we need to, dig in and just try and get out of here with a 0-0. Obviously, it didn't pan out that way over the 90 minutes, which I think is obviously to the manager's credit, but just to just to take some of these incidents in chronological order. The penalty given away, it's Nectar Triantis. He's just, it's an honest attempt to play the ball, isn't it? It's just Alistair Johnston's got in there first, and I think it's the force with which he's clattered into him. I think, just on a side note, Alistair Johnston, he's not got much luck at Easter Road. I seem to remember him getting taken off with a head injury the last time he came up. So it's not been a particularly great venue for him. I think it
happened last time against Hibs as well.
Yeah,
he got a head knock at Celtic Park. So just every time he plays Hibs.
Yeah, every time he plays Hibs. I mean, we can laugh about it because I think he is as far as we know, he is all right. Because he looked kind of out of the game a wee bit when he was getting taken off, and then obviously there was a long delay between that and the penalty being taken. Adam Ida sending David Marshall the wrong way. So, what did you have any complaints about the first penalty incident? I know you kind of try and gauge the feeling online, and it does seem a wee bit split. I mean, I can understand sometimes people looking at it as potentially just being a coming together and a head knock, but I can actually also understand the other side of it that Triantis, he is a bit late. Johnston wins the ball first and he's taking him out. How did you see that one?
I think it's one of those situations, and I feel like we say this about a lot of fouls, a lot of penalty incidents in particular these days, that given the way the rules have gone in 2024, if that happens in the box, then it should be a penalty sort of every time it happens. It doesn't always happen like that. I'm not sure it would have been given as a penalty a few years back, unless it was a particularly stringent referee. I do think Nectar Triantis is unlucky. I think it is an honest attempt to play the ball, but at the same time, it's still a foul. He is late. He absolutely wallops him. I mean, it was even though we're quite far away from the penalty box in the sort of press seats, it is it did look quite sickening at the time, and there was obviously a bit of concern for both players. And certainly when you look at the size difference between Triantis and Johnston, that was perhaps not surprising that Johnston came off worse than that. And as you were saying, sort of quite sort of good that he is. He was taken to hospital, but did sort of recover enough to be able to post on social media and say that he was okay. But I just think when that happens in the box, it's no surprise when it's a penalty. Is it going to get given as a penalty all the time? Probably not. Should it be? Going by the rules, yes. So I don't think you can have any complaints. I know there were some complaints from the Hibs players at the time, but I mean, I think we've got the benefit of seeing it back on replays, and I think it just, I mean, it's would you call it a stonewaller? Probably. I think it's not really. There wasn't really much for debate there for me. Yeah. With the caveat that once upon a time it might not have been, but the way the game is now, then I think every time that happens, it is going to be a spot kick. And you do kind of feel for Triantis because he had a difficult debut against St Mirren, gave away a penalty and was suspect for one of the other goals. Then he's given away another penalty 4 minutes into this game or whatever it was. I think that he probably deserves credit for the way he kind of put that sort of behind him, and I thought he really grew into the game. And I mean, he's obviously not the finished article. He is quite raw. He is quite he has obviously got a lot to learn. But I think you could see signs last night of why Montgomery was so keen to bring him in and why he'd sort of earmarked him as if not the missing piece of the jigsaw in defence, a sort of stopgap at the very least until the summer. Just somebody who can play the way that he wants him to play. Understands what's expected, and I thought along with Will Fish that the pair of them had a difficult time at the weekend, but given that they're both just 20, they haven't played an awful lot of first team football compared to some of the other players in the park last night. I thought they really grew into the game, and it was a pretty solid performance against the likes of Adam Ida, Kyogo Furuhashi when he came on. You look at it and say Celtic didn't score from open play, so that's it's maybe a testament to how well they did. But yeah, for the first penalty, I don't really think there's much up for debate.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a young defender's challenge, isn't it? There maybe is like he's gone in full blooded, and it's one of those if you don't time it to absolute perfection, then I think the outcome is then pretty inevitable. But I've got to agree. I think he he did grow into the game, because you are kind of fearing the worst after that. You know, he's a kind of young guy. He's made, he's given away a second penalty in 2 games. It's 4 minutes in against the Premiership champions. You're thinking, is he going to be in for a long night here? But I think you do have to. He did settle, and I think as you said, you can see what Nick Montgomery likes about him. He's not afraid to take the ball, and I think he got better in possession as well as defensively as the game moved on. You can actually see he's got a decent range of passing. He wasn't scared to try and switch the play. He wasn't scared to step in with the ball and carry it forward when he had to as well. So I mean, you think, as well as being a performance that the team can build on, certainly a player like Jay Andrews, who hasn't had the easiest of introductions to Scottish football, if he removes one. If he forgets about the first 4 minutes of that game, I think he can be pretty pleased with his night's work, and hopefully that's something that will settle him, because he was always going to need a bit of time. 20 years old, he's only made a couple of appearances for Sunderland in the Championship. It's a big jump from then playing in their under 23s to coming up here and to all the kind of the rigours of Scottish football. So I mean, there were promising signs there, and I think, you're kind of, in general, Celtic go 1-0 up after 4 minutes, and then just with Saturday's performance and still kind of a bit too fresh in the memory, you're thinking you're kind of maybe fearing the worst at this point. But in Hibs, they could have capitulated at that point, but I didn't even really get a sense after the first goal that they were even rattled as such. They kind of steadily built their way into the game, and there was, you kind of go from, you're kind of in that sort of fearing the worst mode because of the goal, because of what's happened before, and then it takes you a wee while to realise, actually, Hibs are actually playing quite well here. As the first half moved on, it wasn't the siege that the first couple of minutes made it look as though it could be. Hibs were kind of grown in confidence and possession. I think Celtic press was a wee bit all over the place at times. Just let me try to get my words out. It's early. It was a late night. And I think that helped. And you could see the sort of confidence building in Hibs. The more they were able to pass out, the more they were able to get into Celtic's half. And I think all that was really missing from that first half was a goal to show for it, because they did come back into the game, and Ellie Ewan had that brilliant chance, didn't he? And I think it might have been, was it Liam Scales in the end who got something on it to send it over the bar? But it kind of looked as though, to me, Ewan did snatch at it a wee bit.
Yeah, and I think understandable given the way he's been playing recently. I think he is that kind of inconsistent player that you never really know what you're going to get with him. But even though he did stink the place out a bit on Saturday. It was probably his worst performance in a Hibs shirt, and I think like a lot of fans would have been quite surprised to see him in the starting lineup, given how well Elijah Mayenda did when he came on. You had Mizani Maulida as well. But fair play to him. I mean, it wasn't a vintage performance. It wasn't the Ellie Ewan that we know and have seen previously. But it was an improvement on Saturday. I think he does need to learn to stop shirking some of those 50-50s. I think he does have not gonna say the word before the watershed, but he does have certain tendencies when it comes to 50-50 challenges, and you think, don't pull out of it. He's pulled out of it. And I think just, if he's a confidence player, and I think he probably is, then, you can understand, given the way the Saturday went, then, there is going to be that pressure and think, oh, I've got the ball in front of goal, I need to stick it in, You can end up overthinking it. And, it's one of those where if he'd scored in like the previous 2 games, then maybe he just kind of passes it into the net. Maybe he takes his time. I think he probably had more time than he thought. But I think there was just the way Hibs were playing last night. I mean, there was a time after Celtic went 1-0 up where they were just kind of passing the ball around, and it did feel a bit like a training game. It was quite pedestrian. Certainly a few fans in front of us getting quite exercised and wanting to kind of get in the faces a bit more. But it was. I think sometimes, like, one of the criticisms of the way Montgomery wants Hibs to play is that it can be quite kind of ponderous at times as they sort of build from the back. But I thought it was was a lot more. It was a lot quicker last night. There was a lot more kind of, just like the passing sequences, or as you were saying, Trianta sort of switching the ball. It did feel like there was a bit more tempo to it. And it's maybe just partly that, just just everything's like 100 miles an hour. You want a reaction from Saturday. You know how important it is to try and get points on the board. So it's just, I think it's one of those that if it followed to somebody else, if we didn't have the previous game go the way it did, then maybe it ends up with a different outcome. But to be honest, it happened a lot during the game. The Hibs had a lot of chances, like I was saying earlier. They had a lot of chances, and on another day, they all go in. But it's just one of those nights where it wasn't to be. And then, I think that was perhaps why Dylan Levitt's goal was all the more surprising. Partly because it came from Dylan Levitt, partly because it came from outside the box as well. It feels like when you watch Hibs playing under Montgomery, there does seem to be this kind of work the ball into the box and then shoot. And that seems to be, I think that's what the last 3 goals have come from outside the box. The two at Kilmarnock, and then obviously the one last night. So maybe there is something in sort of shooting on sight. But I think just to go back to Yuan, I think he's that sort of player where even if he's had a stinker the previous game, you think it's always worth playing him just on the off chance. And I do think he needs to be more consistent. I think he needs to be able to put it all together. There's times where I think he's actually said this himself. He said it in a post-match press conference in the second half of last season, that there's sometimes he just kind of drifts out of games mentally. Like, fair play for fronting up like that, but at the same time you think, how? Why? Which, maybe explain some of the things that happens when, he's trying to do step overs in the 18-yard box when he should just be like hitting it into row Z to clear the danger, or like on Saturday when he gets that pass from Marcondes and it just kind of goes behind him and it was like it was like a video game character malfunctioning, and just think that's going to go for that. So, but like we keep saying, he's that sort of player. If he could put it all together, if he was doing it on a regular basis, then he would be at Hibs. So, and when you look at what he's contributed in terms of goals and assists this season, I think he's still up there, maybe top, if not there or thereabouts. So, a hugely frustrating figure. And I kind of went through him in our debrief from Saturday's game, because I thought I do feel he's one of the focal points in this Hibs team, and you need much more from him on a regular basis. And he's obviously got the talent to do it. He's obviously got the skill. He's obviously got the ability. And it's just that, it feels like that sort of like the mental part, the psychological part of just thinking, I need to be able to put this all together for 60, 65 minutes and sort of show what I'm about. He's obviously got lofty ambitions of progressing his career, and the way things are going, he's not going to be progressing it anywhere else anytime soon. So you need more from Yuan. He was unlucky last night with that chance. I still think he was probably only about a 6.5 out of 10 if we're doing player ratings. But on the plus side, definitely an improvement from Saturday. And I think just having certain players back like Martin Boyle, Lewis Miller, it does sort of bring the best out of other players as well. So, you would hope that maybe with a bit more consistency with, what's more of a kind of first choice 11, now that players are back from injury, international duty, then we might start seeing the Yuan of old. But it did look like the kind of chance it was easier to miss than to score. So, if anyone was going to make it more difficult than it needed to be, it was going to be Ellie Yuan.
Well, the goal did come eventually, and I think we can touch on the goal itself in a moment. But I just think it came from a period where you could see that the belief was growing in the Hibs team. It always seems to happen in games against Celtic and Rangers, where if teams can limit them for a certain amount of time, you just slowly see that belief manifesting itself. Right, we can go and have a go at them here. We can. There's something in this for us, and you can certainly see that in Hibs as the game progressed, and the crowd were certainly getting a sense of it as well. It was in terms of atmosphere, just as a brief point, it was night and day compared to Saturday. The atmosphere for the most part was really good, really positive. And it's just, it's natural, isn't it? Fans react to what they see from the players on the park, and they were being given something to get behind last night. And I think, the goal then stems from keeping Celtic at bay for so long, and then that belief starts to kind of manifest itself. I thought Hibs' shape was so much better last night. It was more of a switch to a sort of kind of 4-3-3, which a lot of people have been crying out for a while, and it suited that game. I think instead of obviously Marcondes missing out with a knock, instead of just putting Dylan Levitt into the number 10 role and keeping it the same, it wasn't quite. You had Dylan, as he did in the 0-0 draw against Celtic early in the season. You had Dylan Vente trying to do a job on Callum McGregor. I think Joe Newell was certainly tasked with keeping an eye on Matt O'Reilly at certain points, and I thought both of them did that really well. I thought O'Reilly in particular was kind of on the periphery for quite a lot, and he's perpetual motion, O'Reilly, as well, so it's not like he's just one of those guys who checks out of games and is not trying to really influence it. He's constantly on the move, and I think to keep him as quiet as Hibs did was a testament to how much the shape worked. You had sort of Mariah Welsh and Levitt stepping out to press when needed it, and you had Vente and Newell, who I think were given quite specific jobs, and it just looked much more organised. Of course, it's different maybe from what we're going to see going forward, where Hibs need to then show that when the onus is on them to make things happen in the game, they're not quite the dominant force in terms of possession, that they can that they can do better that way. But I suppose that's a separate discussion. But just coming to Levitt's goal, it was a good moment for him. I mean, you could see in his play. I mean, to me, he looks like the classic case of a guy who has talent, but he is a wee bit short on confidence. You can see it. I feel like you can see it when he's on the ball. Sometimes he maybe overthinks things and then waits a split second too long. But then there was times last night where I felt like he was maybe trying to get rid of it when he had time, and I feel like those are maybe the hallmarks of a guy who's not quite playing with kind of 100% self belief. But then the goal comes, and it was one of those moments where he didn't have time to think about it. The ball's just dropped at his feet, and he's swung a leg at it, and he's got that in his locker. You've seen it. He has got lovely technique when he strikes the ball, and it's one of those ones because of the role he's been playing. He's dropping in and taking the ball from the centre backs, and Hibs have maybe then struggled to link and thread attacking midfield and attack together at times. I think because of that, we've just not seen him in those positions as often as you would like, really, because I mean it was so obvious last night, and it's been he's shown it in his career since he came up to Scotland. He is such a threat from those positions, isn't he?
He is, and it's been probably a source of frustration for Hibs fans that they maybe haven't seen what he is truly capable of. And there's a number of factors for that. You've got a change in manager, you've got a change in style. He had the injury as well, and he's obviously been tasked with, along with Joe Newell, just for kind of keeping that midfield together for what feels like quite a long time. Obviously there were times when Jimmy Jago was coming off the bench. To kind of relieve one of them, but there wasn't really a whole lot else, because you didn't have the likes of Mariah Welsh, who was, I mean, just really, really good. Like we said, midfielder Hibs had been missing. Kind of put himself about. He was everywhere. There were times when he'd be in the middle of the park and then he'd pop up at left back, and you just think, how did that happen? Like, where it just didn't seem to be enough time for him to get there, but he did. Yeah. And I really liked what I saw from him. I think he's got that sort of drive. He's got that box to box energy. I mean, Montgomery described him as having infectious energy, and I get that from last night. And he's also he's like he's a little bit chippy as well. I quite like that. He was in the referee's ear. He was kind of not asking about decisions, complaining about decisions. Kind of
politely inquiring.
Yeah, politely inquiring.
Hibs need a player like that, though, don't they? They
do. Yes.
They need a bit of nastiness.
They do, and that's been like one of the biggest criticisms of Hibs this season. I think that there is. I mean, I don't think it's quite as bad as when Neil Lennon kind of accused them all of being a kind of boy band, and obviously a lot of the players have changed since then. But you kind of need. I think teams benefit from having a player in the midfield who can do that. Like Aberdeen have it with Graham Shinney. That's the easy example. Celtic had it with Scott Brown. Just that sort of player who gets in the referee's face, like asks about decisions, complains, does this, does that, kind of gets at the opponents as well. There were a couple of times he was having a wee bit of a go at Maeda in the first half. There was someone else who was having a wee bit of a go at in the second half, and that's that not only do you need that sort of thing, that sort of character, if you like, in a team, but it also kind of freed Levitt and Newell up a bit more to kind of focus on their game rather than what they have been doing recently, which is almost kind of like trying to hold the team together from the middle of the park. And I think you're right when you say that Levitt did. When he started off, and it's just you could actually hear the howls from the supporters when there was a misplaced pass, or he intercepted but then didn't follow up on the second ball, and just there was a lot of it. You just thought this guy is just absolutely empty of confidence, and you can understand that things haven't really been going his way, especially on Saturday. I mean, you're hooked at halftime, and quite rightly so. I don't think even Levitt's biggest fan would look at his performance on Saturday and say, yeah, I can see why he was taken off. It was, I think the frustrating thing is that what he's capable of. It's a similar story with Yuan, to be honest. And I'm not suggesting that Hibs is becoming this sort of kind of sanctuary for players who have the talent but can't quite put it together. But it's just he's got the talent, he's got the ability, and I think it's very easy to point the finger at players and say you should be doing more, like you should be showing more of what you're capable of. But sometimes it can be down to if the manager's telling them to do a certain thing or play a certain way, and sometimes just the players around them. And I think having Mariah Welsh in there, are we going to see a 4-3-3 more often going forward? It would make sense. Hibs have got the players to do it. This kind of 4-4-2. I know it wasn't a kind of Mike Bassett 4-4-2, but it didn't seem to be getting the best out of a lot of players. And I think I speak for a lot of Hibs fans would say it'd be quite nice to see Dylan Benny playing as a centre forward sometime again soon. It'd be quite nice to see Martin Boyle sort of sticking out in the right wing going forwards, and Dylan Levitt being given a chance to show what he can do in midfield, because he's not been asked to do a sort of second job, because you've got Mariah Welsh who can do that. And a great bit of business by Hibs getting him on a permanent as well, rather than just
it looks
kind
like
of short term deal until the summer, or a loan deal or whatever. You've obviously got Luke Amos who can come on, and the midfield's gone from being like an absolute kind of fright show at times in terms of like a lack of bodies and energy and legs to actually now looking a bit more beefed up and a bit more just a bit more solid, I think. And Amos seems like one of those players who can come on, and he's obviously not ready to start just yet, but he can come on, he can shore things up. Mariah Welsh obviously is that kind of all action, box to box. Joe Newell. I mean, aside from the penalty that he gave away last night, I thought it was a really good performance by him. Sometimes accused of hiding in big games. I don't think that could be levelled at him last night. But I think, we're talking about Dylan Levitt, and I just think you would hope that scoring that goal has probably given him like a huge confidence boost. And if he can combine that with being allowed to sort of play more the way he wants to play, having Mariah Welsh in there should hopefully allow him to keep doing that. So I think it's, you've gone from thinking, he shouldn't be starting against Celtic, to now thinking, it'd be quite exciting to see what he can do now. The kind of shackles are off a little bit now that he's got an extra body in there to help out. And I thought it was noticeable that when he did kind of get pushed further forward, just before he scored the goal and shortly afterwards. And I know he's not your sort of classic number 10. There's Hibs fans who said, he's a 10, get him in there as a playmaker, but he's not that sort of player, but he does seem to come alive in those sorts of positions. We saw it at Dundee United. And, Montgomery has been kind of hinting at this for a while, that, you're kind of, it's makeshift, but it's been makeshift for so long with players out injured, players on international duty. I think with players coming back now, if we can start seeing more of that, then it will be more of a Montgomery team. And we'll start seeing more from players who, maybe haven't really sort of played to the best of their ability so far. But in some cases, perhaps that's not been entirely down to them. So, great strike. He's off the mark for Hibs, and you would hope that he's able to contribute a bit more from midfield between now and the end of the season. Certainly, if he can hit a ball like that, then he is going to get those chances if he gets up at those positions. So. Heck of a turnaround from another pretty woeful performance against St Mirren to starting off and probably I mean, if it's not too harsh, I'd say he was maybe the weak link in the Hibs team in the first part of last night's game, which is maybe understandable, as we've been saying. But he certainly, like so many of his teammates, grew into the game, and that's, I think, laterally we probably saw the Dylan Levitt that Hibs signed rather than the one we've seen playing. So bodes well for the future if he can keep on doing that sort of thing. If he can keep playing with that sort of freedom, newfound freedom, then yeah, I think it could be. Could end up being like a really good bit of business rather than fans standing around thinking why has he been brought in. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it should certainly give him an injection of belief. You would think. I mean, in terms of belief, it certainly gave Hibs a real jolt getting that goal when they did, and there was a kind of sustained period afterwards where it looked as though there was only one team that were going to get the second goal. Chance after chance. I think the one that can obviously sticks out is Malida's effort, just because it was the kind of spectacular overhead, and it's one of those he's caught it really cleanly as well.
Yes.
It's one of those. I know this is a pure classic, commentator thing to say, but he's hit it too well, almost, as they say. Like if
it's classic, it goes down. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if it's anywhere either side of Joe Hart with that. With the pace that he got on it, then it's definitely a goal. I think the goal he's done well enough to react and get his hands up. But I think if it's a bit either side of him, maybe into the far corner, then he's got a real problem. I thought just before we talk about the other chances, I think Malida made an impact when he came on last night. Dylan Venti certainly, he knocked his pan in. He'd been given a job to do, and again, it's a sort of personal sacrifice as to how much of a threat he can be when he's always got one eye on Callum McGregor. But Mazzani came on and it maybe took the shackles off Hibs a wee bit. He seems to have made particularly good impacts in the games where he's come on and he's had a bit of space to attack. He had that against Kilmarnock. So I can't remember. Forgive me, I can't remember if he came on before or after they went down to 10 men. But certainly, for a chunk of his subs appearance against Kilmarnock, he had space to exploit, to run into, and that's obviously what he did for his goal. Last night, again, he gave Celtic real kind of trouble just by spinning and trying to get in behind. I think it was maybe Stephen Welsh that got booked for dragging him down after he'd spun in behind. He was pressing high. He just added a different dimension at a good time in the game as well. I feel like it was a good time to bring him on when you're starting to have that bit more of a go. If you can have somebody there who's just going to offer you a bit more of a sort of direct option. So I was quite impressed with him, and I think he kind of maybe needs to. The next thing for him is to kind of then translate that sort of impact into a starting performance, because obviously that's why he's been brought in to make an impact between now and the end of the season. So obviously he had that effort. Lewis Miller had the one brilliant. Was it Joe Newell that put the ball across?
Newell, yeah.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant pass. Because it's not just a hit and hope into the box that he's picked him out. Even Will Fish popped up in the box, where it was one of those ones where it looked as though the opportunity was gone, because I think him and somebody else kind of sort of got in each other's way a wee bit, and then he's recovered well to swivel, and it's just went past the post. And I think, like, as much as it was like, this is good from Hibs, this is much better in terms of chance creation, in terms of being positive and aggressive. But you did get that, I don't know about you did get that nagging feeling that, if one of these doesn't go in, then there's a chance that they're going to end up regretting it. That was, I don't know about you, but that was certainly the feeling I got.
Yeah, I think we said in the sort of early days of Montgomery's tenure that the way they were playing initially, you thought, if Hibs can put it all together for 90 minutes, then somebody's going to get a real doing. We're still waiting, but I think that it's frustrating because you sort of see that, like, all the components are there. That it's just that, like, I was talking about when Joe Newell scored that goal at Kilmarnock. It's like, great goal. Why don't you do it more often? And then he puts a cross in like last night, and Lewis Miller's coming in at the back post. You think, great, could we see more of this? And I think it's just like, it's like we were saying about Youan and Levitt. Like, there is that talent and that ability, and it's just that I don't know whether it's confidence, I don't know whether it's belief, but just do it, try it, because what's the worst that can happen? And I think when you've got, I don't think don't want to sort of make this out to be Hibs to be like a 1 or 2 man team, because they absolutely are not. But I just think having Miller in that right back position, I felt it got the best out of Will Fish. I felt he looked a lot more comfortable. Thought he linked up quite well with Boyle on that right side. Mariah Welsh as well, sort of coming out wide as well. Just I think I described him and Miller as the Bash brothers at one point. It's that kind of fight and that dig that had been missing for so long. And you talk about Mazzani as well coming off the bench, and I mean he was like a spider on roller skates against St Mirren. It was just really, it's that sort of, have you ever seen a football before? And then he comes off the bench and you think, wow, like this was. I mean, I'd been saying before he came on that I was quite keen to see what he could do against Celtic centre half pairing, and I don't think he'd been on the park for too long when Brendan Rodgers decided to change things up. Which is, I mean, maybe he was going to do it anyway, but it might also have been a comment to how much Mazzani was kind of putting the frighteners on the Celtic defence, and it's we've been saying for so long that Hibs, with the injuries and with new guys coming in, they haven't really had that sort of those impact players on the bench. But you look last night. Mazzani comes on and makes an impact. Amos comes on, and it's maybe a bit unfair to judge him because he is sort of only midway through this sort of like warming up period because he has had that injury. But I thought he showed at times what he can bring. And it's just sort of you've got Mayenda as well who can come on. Emi Marcondes, I know he wasn't in the squad last night, but whether you've got him on the bench or starting, you've got options. And I just think that Montgomery talked a lot on Tuesday in his pre-match press conference about the team needing time to gel and being able to kind of connect, link up, whatever you want to call it. And I think we saw a lot of that last night. And I think the potentially exciting thing is that it's obviously not quite there yet. You've got guys playing last night in the starting lineup who probably haven't spent a great amount of time with each other in the sort of past few days, just because they've been travelling back from international duty, or they've been only recently signed. And it wasn't that sort of disjointed performance that you sometimes get from a team where there are a few new faces. There was a lot of cohesion. There was a lot of sort of really smooth, like joined up play, and I think that's got to be a positive. And the next step is like, okay, right, gel together, put things, string passes together, make it more cohesive. And the next thing, obviously, is to just stick the ball in the net, because that's really it kind of feels like that's what was missing last night. And Lord knows they were trying. I mean, it was we talked. You did that piece earlier this week about him sort of like expected goals and chance creation, and how it was really, really quite alarming because it didn't make for great reading. It was quite concerning, I think. Just the kind of drop off from when Montgomery had first come in, and even though there were sort of like, if you're being a massive optimist, there were sort of slight signs of recovery. Certainly think last night, we did see a lot more of that. Different players getting in there as well. Triantis had a chance. Ewan has chances. Martin Boyle has chances. And you just like it's just spreading the chances throughout the team, which again is something they haven't had. And managers are famed for saying a lot of things that don't actually mean anything. It's waffle, it's media talk. But it is starting to look like Montgomery saying, we're missing several players, but when they're back, we'll be a lot better. Is actually, looks like he was telling the truth. So I think it's obviously one swallow doesn't make a summer. It's one game, but they've still lost. It was a far better performance on the weekend, far better performance from the weekend. But it's now about building on last night's performance and taking the good bits and playing like that in every game. That has to be the sort of minimum. That has to be the benchmark. And Montgomery will be telling his players that. The players will be telling themselves that you want to see Lewis Miller legally, I should point out, thundering into challenges to put the ball out of play and prevent an attack. You want to see Mariah Welsh getting in players' faces. You want to see Jordan Abita having that freedom to sort of canter down the left wing and fling a crossover. You want to see all of that in every game, not just big games under the lights at Easter Road. And obviously we'll learn a bit more about this team, this squad on Saturday at Inverness. But I think this time on Wednesday morning, I think there were probably a few Hibs fans looking ahead to this weekend and with some trepidation. And Obviously, not saying that after last night that that's all changed, but I certainly think, provided the Hibs can build on last night and play the way they played, then they should have a much better chance than if it was a repeat of the St Mirren performance.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I suppose that is the major caveat that comes from last night's performance, is that it will mean very little if it's not backed up on Saturday with a convincing day at the office. I'm not saying that Hibs need to go out and score 4 or 5, against Inverness, but it just a performance. Hurt. Well, obviously, clearly it wouldn't hurt, but just in terms of by convincing, you just mean that the performance result. It's overdue, really.
Yeah.
So just to finish off talking about last night, we'll just obviously the second penalty. It's a heartbreaker. It is a real heart, and especially for it to be Joe Newell, because he had a great game last night. Joe Newell. It was a man's performance, captain's performance from him. He really. You could see he was really hurting after the St Mirren game, and he didn't make any excuses for himself or anybody else, but he looked like a guy who was determined to channel that frustration. Again, like Mariah Welsh, I thought he was everywhere. Use of the ball was good. So then it was a cruel one, and it's an especially cruel irony in that the 2 penalties were conceded. Hibs at the weekend were accused of not being committed enough, not putting bodies on the line, and then the 2 penalties come from 2 guys just making honest attempts to do exactly that. It's how's your luck? It was maybe a wee bit. It's I think once obviously it goes to you see the referee going to the screen. I think it's so inevitable now. I think as soon as Nick Walsh started going to the screen, I remember seeing Callum McGregor picking up the ball and putting it on the spot. Like, you just know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So what did you make of it? I mean, it's a cruel one, but it looked to me as though he has caught him.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting that when you get the chance to see something back, like an instant like that, when you get the chance to see it back so quickly as we could last night because it was a Sky Sports game, you sort of realise like how much you miss in real time. And to be honest, like when Newell made the challenge on Kyogo, I didn't really think anything of it. I thought he's tried to block the shot. Kyogo's got the shot away. Keeper saved it. Fine. It didn't actually really cross my mind that actually this could be a potentially worrying time for Hibs. And there's so many arguments you can make. Like, for instance, if he does that elsewhere on the park, it's probably a free kick. And you look at the replay and you think, okay, yeah, there is contact. It's difficult because obviously, like I say, on first viewing, I thought that's outside the box. I thought it was one of those where I thought Kyogo kind of fell into the box, if you like. And I think you see the replay sort of shortly afterwards, you think, okay, it's right on the line. But again, it comes down to that sort of clear and obvious, and the amount of time that it took to decide it was a penalty suggests that it wasn't clear and obvious, and that's not why VAR was brought in. Just excuse me while I bang this drum again and again and again. And it's very easy to look at it and say, well, if that was up the other end, would it have been given? And just that could be a rhetorical question. We don't need to address that. But I think it is a tough one because obviously Joe Newell's not going in there to hurt the player. He's it's a genuine attempt to try and block the shot, which he does. And, he obviously catches Kyogo as well. And, you see the replay, you think, well, yeah, it's a penalty. If it's in the box. And it just looks like it's right on the edge of it. And it's just one of those things where, if the challenge had been a split second earlier, it might have been outside the box. And, it could be very different. But yeah, like I say, I was a bit surprised at the time. Having seen it in real time, I just thought there's nothing in that. And then, you see the replay and think, oh, actually, yeah, he has caught him. So it's a harsh way to lose a game. It's especially harsh on Joe Newell. He's not. He doesn't really strike me as one of those players who's kind of rash, who sort of makes decisions or makes decisions without thinking. Essentially, just kind of throws himself into things. So he would have been sort of hurt more than most, I think, because it would have been a genuine attempt to try and
Yeah, it was.
Closed the shot down before it was in the box. And it's, like I say, it's just the length of time it takes. Like, how many times are you watching it to determine, yeah, that's a penalty?
Mm-hmm.
And, without VAR, maybe have to escape with a point. But, I just go back to what you say, it's not clear and obvious if it's taken that length of time. And, it kind of becomes a bit of a moot point whether or not it is a penalty, because if you're having to spend that long deciding whether it is a penalty, then, like I say, it's not clear and obvious. But I'm just kind of done with it, to be honest. I just think it's. I mean, Nick Montgomery was talking about this as well, and he just said there were a couple of incidents that Hibs felt they should have had another look at the VAR. Martin Boyle's penalty incident was one.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult because that again, the real time effect, it did look a little bit suspect. But then having seen the replay, you think, okay, well there is contact, and we can't we surely can't get to a stage where if there's contact in the box, there's a penalty. But it's just, I think you either need to use VAR for everything, and games are just going to last 3 or 4 hours, or you just have to refine how it's being used. And I don't know how you do that, but it's disappointing way to end the game. Don't think Hibs deserved it. You could argue that they should have taken their chances more, which is a fair comment. But I think at the end of the day, if you're losing to Celtic because you can see 2 penalties and you've got more shots than them, then that's it in some ways makes the outcome even more difficult to take. But I just I think, like we've been saying throughout the course of this, there was a lot on show last night that I think Hibs can build on, that they can take heart from, and hopefully sort of the start of a bit of a turnaround. A turnaround in form, a turnaround in results, because it is still, I mean, what's that, 2 points from 21 now? That's not a good record. It's poor, and I think Montgomery knows that, the players know that. But I think that they do have a chance now to sort of turn things around. Montgomery did this at Central Coast Mariners in his sort of early on in his tenure, probably about the same length of time as he is into his Hibs tenure. That there was a run of really bad results, and there were a run of results where they were conceding late goals to either lose games or draw games from a winning position, which I think sounds very familiar. But looking at that, okay, he's repeated that at Hibs, but then he comes out of it. He comes out of this sort of bad run, and strings a few good results together. And I think now the acid test is whether or not they can actually do that. But I think based on last night's performance, if not result, I think there has to be a certain degree of cautious optimism that the tide could be turning. Obviously, the players have to back that up on the pitch, but like I was saying earlier in this, you would hope that the injustice or the perceived injustice of last night's result, or just the manner of the defeat, can really galvanise that Hibs team and give that kind of bit of a siege mentality, if you like, to sort of go on and turn things around and actually start putting in the performances that that we know they're capable of. Because Montgomery said this last night, that performance, he says he's always known that the team's capable of that performance. So obviously they have it in them, and it's now down to them just to make sure that they're showing it more often and more consistently.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely reasons to feel a bit more positive, certainly, compared to even 24 hours ago. I suppose the final kick in the teeth for Hibs was that Celtic, who have rotated through about 15 penalty takers this season, finally find the guy to take them when they come to Easter Road. He's stuck 2 away without even thinking about it. So again, how's your luck there? I think we've covered everything from last night's game. I mean, obviously a lot of talking points, but we're going to leave it there for today. In terms of what's coming up, Hibs are doing their pre-match press for Inverness today, so keep an eye on the site for updates from that this afternoon and then later on this evening. If you're watching us on YouTube and you'd mind doing us the huge favour of perhaps liking and subscribing this video, it really is much appreciated. Makes a huge difference for us to be able to keep bringing you these videos. So as I said, keep an eye on the website. We'll have updates from Nick Montgomery at his press conference ahead of Inverness, and we'll be back to preview that game over the next few days. So as always, thank you very much for joining us. Have a good one.